Now that you've had a lightning introduction into modifiers, how about I just show you a few of them and we play around with them because they're incredibly powerful. So, nice default file here. We're going to go over to our modifier properties here, add a modifier. The first one I want to show you is subdivision surface. This is the one that adds sort of a smoothing effect. It adds a whole bunch of geometry to your mesh here, and you'll see it's very powerful. This is used a lot in the organic workflow. So here on the view levels, I'm going to increase this up and take a look. That just adds more and more resolution to this. But here's the fun part. Go into edit mode and you still have that simple mesh. So we'll press 3, click this one here. I'm going to press E to extrude this out. And very quickly, if I select these two faces here and I press I and bring that in there, then I'll press Alt E and we'll extrude along the normals. You can see how quickly we can start to make some really interesting shapes. Let me show you another little thing here. You can right click and click subdivide, and as you know, subdivide now, thanks to that modifier, adds more resolution. So we'll click that and let's go for increase this up by maybe 2 or 3. There we go, something like that. And now we can grab this face and that face. We'll press E. We'll extrude this out a little bit. I'll click in here. I'll extrude this out a little bit more here. We'll select these faces, hit extrude, and extrude that in to some craziness. Or maybe I'll go over to also these sides here, press E and extrude that in to some craziness like so. Maybe go scale and scale those in. So you can see very quickly I'm creating something that looks like a very complex shape, but it really isn't. It's just this subdivide modifier and this simple mesh. It is incredibly powerful. Okay, now that I've done that, I'm just going to undo this a little bit till we have a nice little simple shape like so. I'm going to go back to tab and I'm just going to click and delete that modifier. Now that we have this here, let me show you another fun one, which is the wireframe modifier. And this one adds this sort of wireframe effect. Now you can't really see it, and you increase the thickness, but because we're working the millimeter workflow, sometimes changing sliders gets really intense. So hold down Shift and then do a click and drag, and it'll do a very small incremental changes. So now you can see what we're creating here is this sort of mesh wireframe. Make sure that you turn on boundaries because that's going to give you nice closed mesh rather than some real problems. And here we have a nice little wireframe. Now let's stack this with something really interesting. So here I'm going to add a modifier. I'm going to add that subdivision modifier. And now we get this strange effect right here. Let's go ahead and let's increase the lovely viewport levels. And now I've got this crazy shape going on here. Now the wireframe modifier works off the wireframe of your mesh. So let's go into edit mode and let's add a line right here. So Control R for a loop cut, left click there, right click to cancel the movement. We'll go back into object mode with tab, and now you see we've changed this mesh a whole bunch. So let's just remove our subdivision here, remove our wireframe here, because I want to show you yet another one. I think what I'm going to show you this time around is we're going to add the subdivision, leave it something like so, and then I want to show you the one that is remesh. Now remesh is a fun one. It's used a lot with sculpting sometimes. Well, not sometimes. It is used a lot with sculpting, but not usually as a modifier like this, but it is a fun one. So let's click it on, and there's a whole bunch of changes. Let's go to block first. This one here has the octree depth, which is sort of, you can think of it as a Minecraft-esque style. Then there's a smooth way of remeshing. Again, this is basically remeshing, so it's redoing all the mesh using these equations instead. There's a sharp way, so it tries to keep all the sharp corners, and then there's this voxelized way that basically adds these voxel shapes to it. You can really go low in this resolution. You can get some really interesting shapes. So for instance, we could go for a crazy shape like this, then we can add that wireframe yet again, increase the thickness of this wireframe a bit, and then we can add that subdivision yet again, and very quickly we've got a crazy shape like so. We can even go back here into that remesh and carry on lowering down that remesh subdivision, and you can see how powerful this is. We can make things thicker here if we're wanting them. Maybe this one is a little bit too high, so I'll lower it down. So there's so much to it. And here's the fun part. all of this is still just that simple mesh. So I can go in here, we can select these faces right here, and we can move it. Now, if you want to see the changes in the mesh, some of these modifiers have this edit mode enable, so we can turn on edit mode enable, and you'll actually be able to see what is going on here. So I'll press GY and I'll pull this out, and you can see what is happening. So this is just scratching the surface of modifiers. Now, there are two other modifiers that I want to show you that are used quite a bit within the precision workflow because, well, they're used a lot. You can imagine we use the array modifier a lot. You can imagine that we use the Boolean modifier a lot. Now, the other ones that we use quite a bit is the mirror modifier, the screw modifier, and the solidify. The mirror modifier, as you imagine, this mirrors. So I'm going to select this. We'll go into edit mode. I'll press G, Y, move that face along there. If I click this now, and I go and click mirror, and then I make sure that this is going to mirror on the Z or the Y axis. Here we go. Sometimes you have to click around on the Y axis, so it's mirroring across on the Y. It's as simple as it sounds. It mirrors the mesh. But what I want to show you is the solidify and the screw. First, let's talk about the solidify. Now that I have just this plain flat mesh, I can click here and I can pull this up. So put in a numeric amount, let's say 5. This is going minus. I want this to be in the positive, so I'll press 1, and this is solidified. Add thickness to it all. And that's pretty much it. Now, what's really interesting is that you can use this in conjunction with some very parametric CAD-like programs like CAD Sketcher to create sort of this entire CAD workflow in Blender. It's a little bit advanced for right this minute in a crash course. I would really advise you to understand the fundamentals of Blender a lot deeper before diving into that, but at least you're doing this crash course before you dive into something as complicated as that. So I'm going to delete this solidify. I'm going to go back into edit mode with that face selected. I'm going to press R, Y, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees because the next thing I want to show you is something called the screw modifier. So I'm going to go out of edit mode with tab with this selected. We're going to go add modifier, going to go for a screw, and look at that. Straight away, we've screwed this around. And this is basically it. It is the revolve function inside of many CAD programs. That's what the screw does. But it takes it one step further. You can remove this and go further down on the angular change, or if you want, you can add this screw to have a distance upwards. So let's add a distance upwards like so. Let's add more iterations, and now you can see how this lovely screw modifier works. Now, just for the sake of it, let's stack this up with something else. Let's go with the subdivision modifier here. So subdivision surface, brilliant. Now we have a spring, and let's go and let's add the wireframe one once again. Let's increase the thickness of this up, and then make sure that you turn on boundaries with wireframe, because here, that mesh there is open. And how do I know that? I can click here, face orientations, I can see that that's red. So let's go and then make sure that I have that to boundaries. It closes that face, and let's add the subdivision surface once again. And there we have this crazy shape. And now, you know what? This is a little bit too much, too busy for me. I'm going to go back all the way to the screw one. And here where it says viewport steps, I'm going to whack this down to 8. And now you can see I've simplified that. But again, all of this is just from that one little bit of mesh down there. So this is the modifier workflow. It is the procedural workflow. There is a lot more to this. There's actually something called geometry nodes in Blender. That is basically you create your own custom modifier to do some amazing things. But that there is the modifier workflow in Blender, and I just wanted to show you and just let you have some fun with it.